We all are one in mission. We all are one in call. Our varied gifts united by Christ the Lord of all. A single great commission compels us from above to plan and work together that all may know Christ's love. That is hymn 778 from Wonder, Love, and Praise, which we will be singing today for our recessional. Please be seated. As Terry preached last week, if you heard her sermon, it is a tale as old as time. This is a tale as old as time, part 2. As we continue David's story, who was the greatest king of Israel and much beloved of God. So last week we heard of David abusing his power as king, we hear it again, and taking the wife of Uriah the Hittite as his own. Now Uriah, if you remember, was a loyal soldier of David's army. And no doubt Uriah risked his life on the battlefield many times for Israel, and he certainly would have had the battle scars to prove it. Uriah was also not a rich man, and the most precious thing he had in his whole life was his beautiful wife, Bathsheba. But David did not care that Uriah was loyal to him, nor did he care that Bathsheba was truly Uriah's beloved little ewe lamb. So here we go, a tale as old as time. Leaders who abuse their power, exercise greed, and have a blatant disregard for the rights and lives of other people whom they see as inferior. Inferior because they may have less money, less power, or less social standing. In essence, really the marginalized and the most vulnerable in our nation and in our world. And in direct contrast, another tale as old as time, God is very displeased with David and executes what we would call divine retribution, karma. What goes around comes around. And you will see as we continue to read the book of Samuel in the coming weeks, you will see what happens to David as a result of what he did. So stay tuned for part 3. But today, let us see how David's story is still relevant in our own day. We still have world leaders who abuse their power and position at the expense of others, especially those who have no power, have no voice, and are relegated to the margins of society only to be shunned, ignored, and exploited. I want to share with you a contemporary story, a very disturbing one that is right in our own backyard. As many of you know, or maybe you don't know, there is a rise in discrimination and violence against the homeless all over our country. As Terry shared earlier with me, that homeless bashing is becoming popular. And this discrimination and violence has been given the blessing of our highest court in the land. In its biggest decision on homelessness in decades, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on June 28th of this year that cities can ban people from sleeping and camping in public places. The justices, in a 6-3 decision, of course, along ideological lines, overturned lower court rulings that deemed it cruel and unusual under the 8th Amendment to punish people for sleeping outside if they have nowhere else to go. In a dissent, Justice Sotomayor, God bless her, said the decision focused only on the needs of cities. but not on the most vulnerable. She said sleep is a biological necessity, but this decision leaves a homeless person with an impossible choice: either stay awake or be arrested. And so for now, this ruling only changes current law in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which includes California and 8 other Western states, and by the way, where the bulk of America's unhoused population lives. So let us not be naive. This ruling will not stop there. It will determine similar policies elsewhere and will almost certainly influence homelessness policies in cities around the country. Let me get back to what happened in our own backyard. I have no doubt this ruling fueled the flames of a terrible incident here in Silver Spring on Veterans Plaza not so long ago to some members of our street community. Recently, early one morning, 4 men driving a, quote, nice car swarmed the plaza while folks were still sleeping. Caught on surveillance cameras, these 4 men beat up 6 of the homeless people, 2 of them who were women. 2 of these 6 were injured so badly they had to be hospitalized. One of the women, who took out her cell phone to call 911 for help, one of the men grabbed her phone and smashed it on the pavement as he continued to beat her. This is where it is time, long past time, for our political and religious, civic, and community leaders, for all of us to speak words of compassion and words of condemnation, to seek to hold accountable those who are perpetuating such hatred and violence against the most vulnerable in our land. It is indeed time for all of us to speak the truth in love and say, this is wrong. God does not approve of this behavior. This is evil and sinful. And so today, David's story teaches us one of God's hardest truths that we should heed, because it is a timeless truth. The timeless truth that any abuse of power God finds unconscionable, corrupt, and unacceptable. And this truth does not only apply to world leaders, but it also applies to each and every one of us. I mean, let's reflect a little bit on some of the positions we are in where we are given authority or power. Whether we be a parent, a teacher, a priest, a therapist, a guidance counselor, a coach, a work supervisor, or a military commander, or a controlling friend or spouse. You get my drift. And no doubt, each of us can tell of times in our lives when people we have known and loved have used their power and authority over us in ways which have caused us emotional and spiritual or even physical harm. So when Nathan confronts David with the words, "You are the man," Nathan might be as well confronting us. Nathan's words should give each of us pause to reflect on our own use or abuse of power, and it also should embolden us to hold accountable those who are using their power for wrong rather than for right. Now, we find some guidance in Paul's letter to the Ephesians on what the right use of power looks like in the flesh. Paul says, "Lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit and a bond of peace. And then he tells us how maybe we accomplish this calling by utilizing our various gifts, not for our own gain, but for the good of the whole. The good, so that each person, no matter who they are, where they come from, their life situation, the good that each person can be equipped in some way according to our ability to promote the health and wellness of the whole body of humankind as we strive to build up our world in love. And if you don't want to listen to Paul, look at the Olympics. My goodness, there was a story that brought tears to my eyes last night about how the Olympic community, that people from all over the world, nations, are coming together, and you can see them, congratulating each other for the accomplishments. You can see them comforting one another if they haven't won a medal. You can see that community coming together in support for the benefit of the whole Olympic community. It's beautiful. Now, Jesus in John's Gospel plants the seeds of Paul's letter to the Ephesians. The people who followed Jesus to Capernaum are only coming to him for their own gain, to get some more free bread and free fish. Recognizing this, Jesus uses their coming as a teaching moment. He tells them that human food perishes, but the heavenly food of life God provides in him is eternal and is meant to be shared with everyone. And surprisingly, you know what? They seem to get the message. Sometimes they don't, but they seem to get the message. For they ask him, "Sir, give us this bread always." And then Jesus speaks what I think are some of the most beautiful words in the Gospels. "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." My friends, as we go forth from our spiritual home today, let us listen to our lives. Let us reflect on the power and the gifts we have in the varying arenas of our own daily lives. For God is calling us, always calling us, to be the bread of life for others, to minister to those who hunger for kindness, compassion, and gentleness, and to quench the thirst of those who are utterly parched from hatred, prejudice, and violence, to minister to them by giving them the living water of justice, peace, and love. And so, friends, Jesus shows us the true way. Let us follow him, only him, as the winds of trickery and deceit continue to flow our way. Let us follow Christ and only him. Amen.